Bruce Lee stood calm, yet poised, his piercing gaze locked onto O'Hara, the towering brute who had once wronged his family. The underground tournament had brought them to this moment, fate demanding justice. As the gong rang, O'Hara lunged, his brute strength fueling a reckless attack. But Lee, fluid like water, evaded effortlessly, his movements a perfect harmony of power and grace. A lightning-fast sidekick sent O'Hara stumbling, his arrogance cracking alongside his ribs. Desperate, O'Hara shattered a board to intimidate, but Lee's chilling words cut deeper. Boards don't hit back. The fight resumed, Lee delivering a flurry of strikes with surgical precision. Bloodied and enraged, O'Hara grasped a broken bottle, his last act of defiance. But with one final devastating kick, Lee sent him crashing onto the shattered glass, defeated, humiliated, and forever remembered as the man who fell before the dragon. The sun cast a golden glow over Han's tournament courtyard, where the air buzzed with tension. Bruce Lee stood motionless, his amber eyes locked onto O'Hara, the scarred enforcer who had once wronged his family. The past bled into the present as vengeance took form, not through anger, but through absolute control. The gong rang. O'Hara lunged, his brute strength powering a savage strike. But Lee moved like the wind, graceful, untouchable. With a slight pivot, he sidestepped, his body a living weapon forged in discipline. O'Hara growled in frustration, unleashing a barrage of heavy punches. Each strike found only empty air as Lee weaved effortlessly, his every motion a lesson in economy and precision. Then, with explosive speed, Lee countered, a lightning-fast sidekick to the ribs. The impact echoed through the courtyard. O'Hara staggered, his arrogance beginning to crack alongside his bones. Snarling, he turned to intimidation, grabbing a wooden board and shattering it with his fist. He sneered, expecting fear, but Lee's response was ice-cold. Boards don't hit back. The words cut deeper than any strike. O'Hara's confidence faltered, but his rage only grew. He roared, launching himself at Lee once more, fists swinging wildly. Lee, calm as a storm before landfall, met him head-on. A devastating front kick sent O'Hara reeling. A fist, coiled like a serpent, struck his jaw with surgical precision. A spinning back kick crushed the remnants of his will, defeated but unwilling to accept reality. O'Hara grabbed a broken bottle, its jagged edges glinting under the sun. He charged in blind desperation. But Lee, fast, calculated, unstoppable, delivered a final, devastating flying kick. The impact sent O'Hara crashing onto the shattered glass. He convulsed once, then lay still, his body broken, his spirit crushed. Silence filled the arena. Han watched with narrowed eyes. The dragon had made his statement. The sun hung high over Han's island, casting long shadows across the blood-stained tournament courtyard. Spectators lined the edges, warriors from all corners of the world, watching in hushed anticipation. The fight about to unfold was no mere contest. It was a reckoning. Bruce Lee stood in perfect stillness, the epitome of calm focus, his lean, powerful frame relaxed but ready. Across from him, O'Hara loomed like a predator, his scarred face twisted in a sneer of arrogance. He was Han's most brutal enforcer, a man who had crushed countless opponents without mercy. But Lee was no ordinary opponent. The memory of betrayal burned in Bruce's mind. O'Hara had wronged his family. He had brought suffering that could not be forgiven. This was not just a match, it was justice. The gong rang. O'Hara, fueled by rage and overconfidence, exploded forward. His fists, trained to break bones, swung with deadly force. But Lee did not move like other fighters. He was liquid, slipping effortlessly through the air, each step a calculated maneuver. O'Hara's punches found nothing but the empty space where Lee had been a split second before. A flicker of frustration crossed O'Hara's face. He reset, charging again, attempting to corner his elusive opponent. This time, Lee struck. Like a bolt of lightning, his foot shot forward. A devastating sidekick straight to O'Hara's ribs. The impact was thunderous, sending the brute stumbling backward, clutching his side. The crowd gasped. O'Hara snarled, shaking off the pain. His pride wounded, he turned to intimidation, reaching for a wooden board from a nearby rack. He held it up, locking eyes with Lee, then with a sudden burst of power, snapped it in half with his bare hands. He smirked, expecting fear, expecting hesitation. Instead, Lee's response was cool, effortless, cutting through the tension like a blade. Boards don't hit back. The words struck deeper than any fist. A flicker of doubt flashed in O'Hara's eyes, but pride overpowered it. He roared in fury, charging forward, unleashing a flurry of wild strikes. But Lee had already won. His mind was sharp, his body honed to perfection. Ducking under a sloppy punch, Lee Rita, his hand, found a broken glass bottle. Fingers tightening around the jagged weapon, he lunged, blind with fury. Lee did not flinch. He saw the attack before it happened, felt the intention before the movement began. As O'Hara swung, Lee reacted. A final, devastating flying kick. His foot connected with O'Hara's face, the impact brutal and final. The enforcer was sent hurtling backward. He crashed onto the courtyard floor, his own shattered glass beneath him. A sickening silence followed. O'Hara twitched once, then lay still, his body broken, his spirit crushed. The spectators, warriors, and even Han himself watched in stunned silence. The message was clear. The island sun blazed mercilessly over the tournament courtyard, casting sharp, angular shadows on the cold stone beneath the feet of warriors from around the world. The air was thick with tension, a palpable electricity as combatants and spectators alike lined the edges of the arena, waiting for what they knew would be more than just a fight. It would be a reckoning. At the center of it all, Bruce Lee stood motionless, an image of pure control. His lean, sinewy frame relaxed, but coiled like a spring, ready to strike. His breathing was slow, steady. His eyes, piercing, unwavering, were locked onto the man standing across from him. O'Hara, Han's brutal enforcer, a man feared for his strength and his ruthlessness. His presence alone was enough to intimidate most fighters, but Bruce Lee was not most fighters. O'Hara sneered, his scarred face twisting in arrogant amusement. He towered over Lee, his body built for destruction, his fists hardened by years of crushing opponents without mercy. He had tasted victory countless times, leaving behind nothing but broken bones and shattered spirits. And yet, despite his reputation, despite his size, something about the way Lee carried himself, the absolute calm, the effortless confidence, unnerved him. Still, O'Hara refused to acknowledge it. This was just another fight, another opponent to crush. The sound of the gong rang through the courtyard. O'Hara charged. His boots pounded against the stone floor as he lunged forward, his fist, a sledgehammer, swinging with the intent to destroy. But Lee was already gone. A shift of his weight, a slight pivot, and O'Hara's strike hit nothing but empty air. The enforcer's momentum carried him forward, and before he could recover, Lee struck a lightning-fast sidekick, powered by years of discipline and training. The ball of his foot drove into O'Hara's ribs with pinpoint accuracy, the impact echoing through the arena like a gunshot. O'Hara stumbled back, eyes wide for a fleeting moment before his snarl returned. He refused to believe what had just happened. He growled, shaking off the pain, trying to convince himself it was nothing. But Lee had felt it. He had heard the way the breath had left O'Hara's lungs, the way his stance faltered ever so slightly. He knew that behind the mask of arrogance, doubt was creeping in. O'Hara needed to reassert his dominance. He needed to intimidate. He turned sharply, striding toward a rack of wooden boards at the edge of the courtyard. The crowd murmured in confusion as he picked one up, gripping it in his calloused hands. Then, with a sudden burst of power, he snapped the board in half. The crack of splitting wood cut through the air, and O'Hara turned back to Lee, smirking, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. He expected fear. He expected hesitation. Instead, Lee's response came cool, effortless, and sharp as a blade. "Boards don't hit back." The words sliced through O'Hara's confidence like a knife. The smirk faltered for just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Lee had already won the battle of the mind, and now it was time to finish the battle of the body. O'Hara roared, his pride consuming him. He launched himself forward again, swinging wildly, desperate to land a single hit. But Lee remained untouchable, his movements precise, fluid, economical. A slight sidestep, a quick parry. Each of O'Hara's attacks was met with nothingness, frustration mounting with every failed attempt. Then Lee struck, a powerful front kick to the chest. O'Hara reeled, a blinding punch to the jaw. His head snapped back, a spinning back kick to the ribs. He crumpled, gasping, clutching his side. The crowd gasped. Never had they seen such efficiency, such dominance. O'Hara, the feared enforcer, the man who had crushed so many, was being dismantled. Desperation took hold. O'Hara's eyes darted around, searching for something, anything, to turn the tide. His hand found a broken glass bottle from the courtyard floor. With a wild, unhinged scream, he lunged, slashing the jagged weapon toward Lee's face. But the dragon had already seen it. Time seemed to slow. Lee's body shifted, his movements a blur of precision and instinct. As O'Hara swung, Lee exploded forward a final, devastating flying kick. His foot connected with O'Hara's face, the impact thunderous.